that. Perfect. Okay. Thanks everybody for joining today. We have Dena and Dena Podrebarac. How do you say your last name?
Podrebarac.
Podrebarac. Okay. I tried. From Monarch Watch in Lawrence, Kansas. She's here today to talk to us about pollinators and pollinator gardens. And I'm going to do a quick intro for Dena and then hand it over to her. So Dena, after earning her bachelor's and master's degree in biology from Emporia State University, Dena began her professional career as a summer naturalist for the Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks for 2 years and as adjunct faculty for Highland Community College. She then worked for the Public Education Department at the KU Natural History Museum for many years. After taking a break to be a stay-at-home mom, she returned to KU to work at Monarch Watch in February of 2016. Dena's main duty is administering grants which award free milkweed plants for habitat restoration projects and public gardens. And fun fact, I was a recipient of one of those grants last year, so I can attest to her good work. And Dena's the milkweed coordinator at Monarch Watch. And I also just want to mention that Evergy is our series sponsor for the virtual monthly events. So a thank you to them for helping us keep these webinars free and available to all. So Dena, I'm going to hand it over to you.
All righty. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen immediately because I have a nice big graphic.
Looks good.
All righty. And can everyone hear me okay? Just let me know if there's some no's. So my name is Dena Podrebarac again, and I work at Monarch Watch, which is at the University of Kansas, and our website is in our logo. So it's easy to find us online. And so keep that in mind, monarchwatch.org. Again, as Morgan said, I'm the milkweed coordinator, and that we are located at KU. Oh, and my email was on there if you happen to notice. If anybody wants to email me afterwards, it's pretty simple. And the organization I work for was founded by this gentleman here, Dr. Chip Taylor, in 1992. He's a professor at KU who is now retired from KU, but he's still the director of Monarch Watch. We are a nonprofit education, conservation, and research program based at the University of Kansas that focuses on the monarch butterfly, its habitat, and its spectacular fall migration. So I really enjoy working at a place where the word spectacular is in our mission statement. You might have noticed that 2022 is 30 years after 1992. We're having a big celebration this year. We're turning 30 years old. And at the bottom there is the link to the events that we'll be having in September. The mayor of Lawrence is going to declare September the month of the monarch. And we're going to have a big banquet and lots of events surrounding raising awareness about monarchs and celebrating our 30 years of conservation work. So I know I'm supposed to talk about pollinators and pollinator gardens, but I have to start out by talking about Monarch Watch and monarchs. And of course, we start at the very beginning, the egg. This is a very enlarged picture of a monarch egg on a leaf. And some of you may already know what kind of leaf it's probably on. We'll save that for a minute. This is a monarch butterfly caterpillar, again on a specific type of plant, feeding away, going through, as we call insects go through metamorphosis as they change throughout their lives, and monarch butterflies are a great example of complete metamorphosis. Egg, larvae, or caterpillar. Oops. I guess I'm not coming to the chrysalis yet. No milkweed, no monarchs. So monarch caterpillars only eat milkweed. If you see a monarch caterpillar, they're probably going to be on milkweed if they're eating. If they're not eating, it's probably because they're getting ready to make their chrysalis, so their pupa stage. And the milkweed is toxic. And so therefore, when monarchs consume milkweed, they become toxic themselves. And that's why they can be bright colors and still much of the time not be predated upon, because predators learn don't eat the big orange critter. Unfortunately, the milkweed population has been decimated throughout, especially the Midwest and the Corn Belt. And so what we feel at Monarch Watch is the key to the monarch survival, and the survival of the monarch migration anyway, is to plant milkweed. Anywhere we can find that it will be able to survive. Now, somewhere in here, we lost the picture of the chrysalis. Oh, well, maybe my slides got out of order. So here are adult monarchs. Looks like they're on a Mexican sunflower, which is not a native plant, but that's okay. Here in Kansas and Missouri, we promote the planting of native plants. But if a plant is non-invasive and non-aggressive, we're not necessarily averse to a good plant that attracts pollinators that's not native to our area and is just annual. And there we see a couple of males. You can tell they're males because of the 2 black dots on their hind wings. Those are called pheromone pouches. And so the males only have those, and that's how you can tell that those are male monarchs. So besides eating milkweed, the adults have to eat, and they eat something completely different. Inside the chrysalis, their mouth parts completely change over from being munching mouth parts to sucking mouth parts. And so they have a proboscis that's like a straw to suck nectar from flowers. So if you're going to promote monarchs, you not only need milkweed, but you need nectar sources as well. I just noticed that my colleague entered the waiting room. And hi, Angie.
Hi, I just wanted to make sure you made it. I just come in.
Oh, okay, bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Okay, so we're talking about that the adults need nectar sources. And when I'm talking about monarchs, that is our signature species. That is our keystone species. They're iconic, they're well known. But I'm also, when I'm promoting monarchs, I'm also promoting all other pollinators and insects and all members of the ecosystem. But we're focusing a little bit on monarchs here because there are the species that our organization focuses on. So when I say that the adults need nectar, all adult butterflies need nectar sources of different types and that are blooming throughout the summer, not just the spring, not just the summer, not just the fall, but different blooming times all throughout the summer season. And of course, native nectar sources provide food for lots of other species as well. So the monarchs are really cool in that they migrate, and they can migrate very, very long distances. We'll start with this time of year right now. We're in the summer. And so most of the monarch population is spread out throughout the east of the Rocky Mountains, clear up into southern Canada. And they are looking for milkweed to lay their eggs. They are looking for nectar sources and growing their population over the summer. Adult monarchs live about 2 to 6 weeks. And through that time, the females lay about 500 eggs. They mate with the males multiple times. And as the summer progresses, we go through about 4 generations. Then coming up well, early this month, really, monarchs up north in Canada are going to start getting cues from the environment to start migrating. The days are going to get shorter and cooler, and the angle of the sun changes, which are all things that we think give them the clues to start migrating south. And by the time the majority of the population gets to this area in Kansas and Missouri, it will be about mid-September. And then they will just continue flying on through until they make it to central Mexico in the Oyamel fir forests, just west of Mexico City. There's quite a mountain range there where they can spend the winter in kind of a state of torpor that is, so they're not very active, and they can reserve the nutrients that they collected as they migrated south. Incidentally, I forgot to mention that as they're migrating, besides the cues they get from the environment, they also go into a state of sexual diapause. They do not become sexually active in the fall as they're migrating. That happens the following spring. And this allows them to then have a much longer life. And the monarchs that migrate live about 6 to 9 months, because they then make the return trip the next spring up north to Texas and Louisiana and Oklahoma, and mate and lay their eggs, and then that's when they die. So they make the both directions of the migration. Okay, here is a picture of some monarchs in the overwintering site. They cluster in the trees at high altitudes, and they cluster to keep warm and to stay inactive. And it's just a phenomenal sight to see that many monarchs together. You can see this many monarchs together occasionally up in North America, up in the United States and Canada when they're migrating. They might stop and make a roost at night. This is an overhead view of the overwintering sites in Mexico. All of that orange that you see are monarchs. And this is how the scientists make an attempt to measure the size of the monarch population, is by measuring the size of the area they take up at the overwintering sites. And over the years, beginning in the winter of 94, 95, they began doing this. So the measurement is how many hectares they cover, which is somewhat similar to an acre. It's a unit of measure somewhat like that. And this has been done by the World Wildlife Fund in Mexico since then, up until this winter. And you can see basically the general overall trend is downward. And of course, this is due to multiple factors. I already mentioned one is the loss of milkweed, but just also general loss of habitat because of human expansion, general loss of native areas because of the expansion of agriculture, quite a few things happening. There are ups and downs in the population based on good years and bad years, different weather events. The monarch population is closely tied to the weather. And so it kind of goes up and down, but you can see the general overall trend is downward. So here are some of the other reasons besides the loss of milkweed. Milkweed used to be found in agricultural fields throughout the Corn Belt. And when genetically modified seeds of corn and soybeans were introduced, then the fields could be sprayed with glyphosate or Roundup, and it would kill everything except the corn and soybeans. And so milkweed has been basically removed from the agricultural landscape. Also, biofuels, ethanol, the making of ethanol from corn has just the fact that it's been increased and put more agricultural fields into use. Both of these factors, the number 2 and number 3, have to do with biofuels and the loss of habitat. Then the margins and fragments of these fields have become smaller and smaller due to herbicides, drifting, and development, and agriculture becoming more intensive as the need, especially for ethanol, grows. Mosquito control with insecticides causes major problems, especially in cities. Degradation of the overwintering habitats in Mexico. Things aren't great there either. There's illegal logging. There's avocado farming that can take some of the habitat, although it's much further down the slopes right now. And just unfavorable breeding conditions as a result of climate change. So what is being done? One of the things that's being done is that in 2014, President Obama issued a memorandum that called for the creation of a federal strategy to promote the health of honeybees and other pollinators. So that includes monarchs, and of course, lots and lots and lots of insects that do their part in pollinating. So, and one of the things that came out of this that you may have heard of is the Mayor's Monarch Pledge, which different mayors around the country can take a pledge to do something in order to promote monarchs in their city, and it can be at different levels. Here at Monarch Watch, the things that we try to do to help the conservation of the monarch is that we, one of our biggest components is education. Educators and parents also, and nature centers can get rearing kits from us. All you need to do is provide the milkweed, and you can raise monarchs in your classroom. And it's a great educational tool to teach the insect life cycle, just general awareness about monarchs and their migration. So it is a wonderful tool. One of the other things that Monarch Watch promotes is the Monarch Way Station program. And that kind of lends itself more to what we're talking about today. And that is creating pollinator habitat. The Monarch Way Station program was begun in 2005, so that encouraging people to add monarch habitat wherever they possibly can find a place to it, even if it's just your front yard or a strip of your front yard. And by now there are almost 40,000 monarch way stations that have been registered through our program. And starting in 2013, we began our milkweed market and our free milkweed grants. You can apply for free milkweeds if you're doing habitat restoration of 2 acres or more, or if you are a school or nonprofit organization creating a garden at your public site, you can apply for a free flat of milkweeds. All this is done on our website. Since we began this campaign, which is called the Bring Back the Monarchs campaign, we've distributed over 1 million milkweed plugs, and that's between native plant sales, the free milkweed programs, and our milkweed market where we sell milkweed by the flat. We have partner nurseries around the country that help us with this. People donate milkweed seed to us, then we send the seed out to the nurseries, they grow the milkweeds, and then we help them distribute it. We find the customers, and then it's shipped out around the country. Our restoration programs, as I already mentioned, are the milkweed market, the free milkweed for schools and nonprofits, and the free milkweed for restoration projects. Okay, so pollinator gardening. This is Monarch Way Station #1 here at Monarch Watch. It's a formal garden that has not only nectar sources for all types of pollinators, but it also has milkweed. So that makes it a Monarch Way Station. And then, like I said, almost 40,000 Monarch Way Stations later, this was the first one, and you can visit it anytime you're in Lawrence on the West Campus of KU, 24/7, 365. You can come visit it as long as you don't park in a permitted parking spot. Here is some milkweed in Monarch Way Station number 1. This is common milkweed. Here is another way station. I believe this one happens to be in Oklahoma. Still kind of a more formal garden. And you can see they've just put it in any little spot they could. It's surrounded by concrete and asphalt, but they found lots of little places to put in flowers. Or you can make your whole yard a Monarch Way Station. This is my yard. I made the whole front yard a little prairie. I call it my little pocket prairie. And there's a whole spectrum of what you can do with your own property for how much you want to convert it to pollinator friendly habitat. I went the far extreme and making my whole yard pollinator habitat. And this is a positive in that there's not a non-native grass lawn that needs pesticides and fertilizers and chemicals and lots of water to survive. Plus the diversity of it is good for wildlife. This is another view of my yard. And you can see there's native grasses in here, black-eyed Susans, milkweeds. I think I've got 5 or 6 different species of milkweed in there, all native. There's nothing non-native in here. Not that we're against non-natives, like I said before, but I decided to make this a native planting, which is registered with our city. Another view on the sidewalk. So this is a great resource for creating a pollinator habitat of your own. This organization called Pollinator Partnership puts out a publication for different parts of the country. And you just enter your zip code into their website and it pulls up the planting guide for your area. So this is really handy. Kansas and Missouri fall into several different zones. So you just enter your zip code to figure out which one's yours. And then also the Xerxes Society, which the URL is right here at the bottom. They have great plant lists and guides as well. Now, what these guides do is give you lots of great ideas for planting for pollinators, but it doesn't really tell you, like, for example, the host plant for certain insects. Like the host plant for monarchs is milkweed. So at Monarch Watch, oh, sorry, I almost skipped this slide. As we said before, the native nectar sources provide food for many other species. So if you see here, this is a New England aster that this monarch is on, but it is also the host plant for the pearl crescent butterfly. So pearl crescent females will lay their eggs on New England asters. So at the Monarch Watch website, go to this specific page, monarchwatch.org/garden. You can find a plant list that also includes the host plant. So if you want to attract, say, the red admirals to your yard to lay eggs, you would plant false nettle. Or if you want to attract the variegated fritillary, you'll plant passion vine. So those are just some examples. This is just the beginning of the list. It's about 4 pages of different plants. And there's a key here to whether they're native or not and where. So it's a really useful tool. Of course, I'm going to promote planting milkweeds in your pollinator habitat. And in our area, I'm going to talk about 4 different species that are great for planting in our area. They're native and fairly easy to find at local native plant sales. if you go to a nursery or like a garden center, I should call them, like a garden center at Home Depot or Walmart or wherever, and you find milkweed, it's very likely that it's been treated with systemic pesticides. So if you want native plants for your garden that aren't going to kill the insects that come to it, it's best to go to a native plant sale run by a local organization that you can for sure find out if they were grown without pesticides, or at least pesticides that are systemic. So this is swamp milkweed, and it grows very easily in gardens. All milkweeds like full sun, and they're native, so they aren't too terribly in need of water. Swamp milkweed, though, does like wetter soils, so it actually does very well in gardens. And it has a beautiful purple flower and attracts female monarchs to lay their eggs. This is whorled milkweed, another great garden milkweed. It does spread underground, but it's small and easy to control. And again, it is native. This is common milkweed. It's pretty aggressive, and you would definitely want to either control it or be happy with it spreading. But it has a beautiful scent and a beautiful flower, and is great for attracting female monarchs. And of course, the flowers attract all sorts of different pollinators to the nectar. This is butterfly milkweed. And again, another great garden plant. It doesn't spread really aggressively. It has a beautiful flower, and again, native, and attracts female monarchs. Okay, that is the end of the slides, but I was hoping that you all might have lots of questions, and we can also go back and look at things that you wanted to see again. So I can turn it over to that. Should I just stop sharing my screen?
Thank you, Dena.
You bet.
I know I learned a lot, and I always love talking about native plants too. Yeah, like she said, if anyone has any questions, you can feel free to come off of mute. If you want to ask them out loud, also you can post them in the chat. Dena, Anna just asked, when in Kansas is the best time to plant common milkweed seeds?
Okay, milkweeds are a little difficult to propagate. They are like many other native seeds in that they have to go through a cold wet period called cold moist stratification. So they have to go through the winter and get imbibed with water. Moisture and cold temperatures. So what you would do is sow it in the fall or in the early winter, and you want to sow more than you want to come up, because the germination rate won't be very high. What we recommend is that you either start the seeds indoors in the winter by artificially stratifying them, or waiting till spring and buying milkweed plugs or milkweed plants that have already been started in a nursery. So those are your options. There's lots of websites out there that show you different techniques of how to cold moist stratify the seeds yourself. Basically, you can put them in moisture and vermiculite, or even a wet paper towel, and put them in your refrigerator for about a month, and then sow them once they're imbibed and they start to germinate. Sow them in some starter germination soil, and then transfer them outside in the spring. There are lots of different organizations that have native plant sales in the spring and some in the fall. You can plant the plugs, like we call them, that are grown in the nursery. You can plant them in the spring or the fall, depending on when the sales are.
One other thing that I'll add, just from experience, is I've done the milk jug method.
Mhm.
So I think I started them I put the milk jugs out like very early spring, maybe late winter. And so you get that cold stratification, but you can, for me, it was just easier to do the milk jug method because then I know where the seeds are.
Mhm.
And so I can take better care of them and like see that they're actually sprouting. So that's one way also
Absolutely.
that I personally have had some luck with.
Mhm.
Okay, Karen has a question. She says she has 2 small 40 by 20 pollinator gardens at their early childhood center with 2 to 3 types of milkweed, nectar sources, coneflowers, asters, sunflowers, parsley, carrots, and bee balm. How can she become a way station?
That is the perfect example of a school way station. So that first slide I showed you with our website, monarchwatch.org, that's part of our logo. If you go there and click on our, you can do it one of two different ways. You can click on the way station link, and that takes you to a whole bunch of information about Monarch way stations. And then within there, you can then click on a link to our shop where you can certify your garden and purchase a sign. And you get assigned a number and a certificate and the sign, and then you become a Monarch way station. Or you can just go to monarchwatch.org and just click on the shop and go straight to the shop to purchase it. But it doesn't hurt to go to the information page to learn more about the program, why it was started, why we do it, and lots of good tips about how to have a Monarch way station.
Thank you.
Similarly, I wrote also that we have a garden at my school that I would also like to be a way station, and am curious about the grant process. Is that also pretty clear on your website?
I don't know if I'm frozen or if she's frozen, but the process for, okay, can everybody hear me?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
you're good, Dena.
Yeah.
Let me just go ahead and share my screen again here. Okay, so this is our website and at monarchwatch.org. And if you're interested in the way stations, over here on the left is the Monarch Way Station program. You can click on that and it takes you to that information. If you're interested in free milkweeds, that is right here in the center in this green button. Hopefully you can see my cursor.
Yes.
Okay, good. So you click on free milkweeds and it takes you to either free milkweeds for
Great.
restoration projects
Yeah.
or free milkweeds for, I'm sorry?
No, I'm saying awesome.
Oh, okay. Free milkweeds for restoration or free milkweeds for schools and nonprofits. Here's the information page for free milkweeds for schools, and the application is right there. And basically what you need is a plan in place. Oh, this is the example form that shows you what you're going to need to know when you apply. It seems daunting, but basically we're trying to make sure that the garden doesn't go in and then get neglected, that there is a long-term commitment to the garden. And then if there is, and you have a plan, then you will be awarded a free flat of milkweeds. So 32 plugs, including shipping. And then the free milkweeds for restoration projects, you need at least 2 acres. And you need to be doing habitat restoration, not a garden. And it can be on private land. And we'll give you a minimum of 4 flats. You do need to pay the shipping, but it's very reasonable compared to the value of the plants. Milkweeds are not cheap, especially because they're so hard to grow. but we have funding sources through fundraising and other donations that cover the cost of the plants. And you just have to pay the shipping. And then of course, plant them and care for them and get them established.
I can attest that the process is really easy. It's really simple.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I did the one for restoration. And yeah, the application process and everything is really simple. You'll just want to think about time of year and make sure that depending on the size of your project that you'll have people to help you. That was really key for me.
Yeah, most of our distribution is in the spring. And so that, and if the milkweeds are ready a little bit late, that can run into when schools are closing for the summer. And then the teacher may be left to plant them all. We do a little bit of distribution in the fall sometimes. Usually it depends on whether we have funding left over or some other need to propagate in the fall. But usually it's in the spring, and we try to get them out before school's out, but that doesn't necessarily always happen.
How far can rhizomes from common milkweed shoot out? I have a median that I might be able to talk my neighbors into common milkweed. If I can tell them that it's not going to go under the street and into their yard.
I'm pretty sure they won't go that far. I think they would.
I've heard they can go like 10 or 12 feet, but that's
yeah. I can't tell you 100% for sure, but I don't think they would go that far.
Okay, I think I'll just
the seeds, of course, could disperse in the wind and end up in those yards.
We can collect those, though. I mean, I usually collect them at our early childhood center, and it's a project with the kids to make seed bombs with them and have fun throwing those in common places.
Guerrilla gardening.
Right. Thanks.
You bet.
Yeah, any other questions for Dena? Feel free to come off of mute and speak up or put a question in the chat if you have one.
If you live anywhere near Lawrence, we have several events a year, and we also have a native plant sale in the spring, and watch our website for all of those different things. Open houses, plant sales, and of course our 30th anniversary next month.
Were you going to ask another question, Karen?
It was about marsh milkweed. I have lots of common, but I'm having a little bit of trouble getting marsh milkweed established. Is that more difficult to grow, or is it just? I started a lot sooner with the common, so maybe that's just it. I just recently started with the marsh milkweed. Any hints for getting that established? I've kind of been stealing some from my neighbor and trying to transplant it when it's just sprouting up.
Well, it's difficult to transplant native prairie plants because they have extensive root systems, and when you try to transplant them, it breaks the root system, and sometimes that transplant doesn't survive.
I think I have one that's surviving. So milkweed seeds, collecting the seeds and then maybe in seed bombs would probably be better.
Well, then seed bombs or planting a young plant, a plug that has just been started in a nursery. Then you put it in the ground and then let the roots establish in the first place it's planted. That's what I've done with my swamp milkweed at home.
Okay.
In fact, let me share again. Back to my presentation. That is swamp milkweed in my yard right there.
Nice.
And it is in a spot that gets some shade. The swamp milkweed can tolerate a little bit of shade.
Okay.
But it also doesn't mind full sun. And it, like I said, it does like to have soils that don't drain as much. Likes to kind of stay moist.
That's probably the biggest issue with me.
Yeah, which is very different from all the other milkweeds.
Right.
And that's why it's called swamp milkweed.
Makes sense. Okay.
Dina, Laura asked, which milkweed is the tropical one, and is it not a good idea to plant that in the Midwest?
Okay, so that's a big controversy. Tropical milkweed is native to Central and South America. It's not native to North America. It has become naturalized in Florida and maybe like in southern Texas. It is a perfectly good milkweed to attract females. Female monarchs love it. The unfortunate thing where it has been naturalized is that it doesn't die back in the winter. Here, it dies back in the winter because it's non-native. It doesn't survive our freezing temperatures. So diseases don't have a chance to build up. So if you want to plant tropical milkweed in your garden, there's not a lot of negatives to that here, where we have seasons, we have a hard freezes. The reason that it's not a good idea to plant it where there are no freezes is that diseases tend to build up on the leaves, especially a certain protozoan disease called OE, which I never have learned how to pronounce. It's very long, but it's a protozoan, and the spores build up on the adult monarchs and then get sloughed off onto the plant, where then the caterpillars then eat the spores and the protozoan develops inside the caterpillar. So over time, the spores build up after more and more monarchs have visited the plant. And that's not as big of a problem with native milkweeds because they go dormant and the top growth dies off in the winter. Same with the tropical, if in this area, but it doesn't come back. But it does present a problem where it doesn't die off. They recommend cutting it back in those areas, but then there are also people who are proponents of just banning it in areas where it has become naturalized, and to promote the native milkweeds instead. Because even if they don't have a freeze, they still will have a dormant period and the top growth will die back. Hopefully that makes sense.
It really does, and I appreciate the science on it because I was given a bunch of plants early this season because I had a friend working at a nursery, and there were not caterpillars. Well, there were caterpillars on a lot of these plants. So then I brought them inside and I was like nursing these caterpillars in the classroom. But then it occurred to me, like, you can't let the butterfly go. It has nothing to eat because it's so early in the season still. So it was just this weird controversy, but I ended up like trying to feed the butterflies in the enclosure. And we did actually successfully raise a few butterflies, monarchs that went out. But it made me think about how disrupted the cycle can get because of the commercial growers and all that. I mean, I know it's very complicated, but thank you for clarifying that.
You bet.
Speaking of raising monarchs, Dina, is there like I remember raising monarchs when I was in elementary school, and that was so much fun. And I have friends who do it with their kids. But then I've also heard that it can like spread disease. Do you have any thoughts on that, on raising monarchs and whether or not that's a good thing to do?
So Monarch Watch promotes raising monarchs purely for educational purposes. We're not going to save the monarch population by growing them on our porch, or by raising them on our porch. Yes, you can bring a few in, you can save them from predators, you can learn more about them, you can gain an appreciation for them, but that's not the way to save the monarchs. There are people who raise hundreds and hundreds of monarchs in indoor enclosures. And unfortunately, they've gotten the idea that this will help save the monarch because it's imperiled. It's really not the monarch that is in danger of going extinct, it's their migration that's in danger of going extinct. And the best thing you can do is provide habitat and, of course, education. So planting milkweeds, planting nectar sources that bloom all year round, especially, or all summer long, especially in the fall when they're migrating. And they don't need milkweed in the fall, they need nectar sources as they're migrating to Central America. And there is nothing wrong with bringing a few monarchs in and raising them. Yes, you do need to sanitize and keep it clean, just like with any organism that you try to grow, you try to take care of in a cage. Disease can get out of control. And say you have 10 monarch caterpillars in a cage, one of them gets a disease, they're probably all going to get it. And if you're raising hundreds of monarchs, then same situation. So there's been kind of a movement, especially you'll see it like on monarch Facebook groups and stuff where people are, I raised 700 monarchs, to try to help save them. And there's been a movement on Facebook and other social media saying, no, you don't, that's not a good thing. Not only does it, can the caterpillars get diseased, but they also, if you raise them indoors and then release them in the fall when they're supposed to be migrating, sometimes they didn't get the cues from the environment to become, to go into sexual diapause and start migrating. So if you are going to raise monarchs at that time of year for educational purposes or as a hobby, then you want to raise them in an enclosure that is exposed to outside temperatures and light. And then they will get the cues from the environment to migrate.
Thank you. That's really interesting. Makes sense.
Yeah, there's a lot of misinformation out there. For example, just last week, an international organization declared the monarch endangered. That was not the United States Endangered Species Act. It was it was an organization that promotes wildlife. And
World Wildlife Fund.
No, it wasn't World Wildlife Fund. I had never heard of the organization before, but it is international, and they put them on their red list, and it hit the media, and everybody thought, including some of the reporters, that the monarch had been declared endangered by the Endangered Species Act.
Right.
In actuality, they have been declared eligible to be put on the threatened list in the United States, but precluded because there are so many other species that are worse off. There will be, they'll kind of take a look at it every year and see if they need to move them up and actually put them on the threatened list. But right now they are not on the United States Endangered Species Act list as threatened or endangered. Just that it's warranted though, but they don't have enough resources. And again, this is not, it's not that the monarch population is threatened, it's that their migration is threatened, especially due to climate change.
What are the 3 most bang for your buck fall plants, nectar sources to plant in the St. Louis area?
Asters,
Got those.
sunflowers, goldenrods,
Golden.
Bidens, which I'm not sure what the common name is. I think Bidens is a genus name.
How do you spell that?
Bidens. And
Thanks.
there are native asters and there are non-native asters. Lots, that's a really big fall blooming one.
Okay. Mine haven't started to bloom yet. I have the aromatic asters.
Yep, it seems like forever, but then in September, there they go. And
Yeah.
it's great for the migrating, for any insects that are active in the fall, especially migrating monarchs.
Okay, great.
That's true for goldenrod also. It's a really late bloomer.
Mhm.
Okay. And maybe the Biden, is that a gold nugget? Does that seem familiar?
I'm not sure. I'd have to Google that.
I know, I was trying to find it because I'm gonna do a little planting, and so
Well, the first thing to come up was our president.
I know, of course.
Yeah.
So the ones that I have at my house are burr marigolds.
Oh,
And I don't know, that's,
No, it reads the common names: beggar ticks, blackjack, burr marigolds, cobbler's pegs, Spanish needles, tick seeds.
yeah, and tick seeds. Those are the ones I
Interesting.
have.
Cool.
yeah, I would just say look for the member of the Biden's genus that is native to our area, and
Yeah.
that's the one that I was referring to. I just don't know which one it is.
No, it's okay. I can look it up. Thank you.
Okay, uh-huh.
Cool. Okay.
And don't forget those guides from Pollinator Partnership and the Xerxes Society and the Monarch Watch website. Those are good resources. And I believe it also, the guides tell you what time of year they bloom.
Cool.